Academy, Roslyn Academy, started in 1947 by EMM in Tanzania. And it's really interesting if you go to Roslyn Academy's website and look at their history page, they have pictures from 1947. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and the teachers are actually wearing head coverings at that point with EMM. So it's this really old, kind of storied history of how the school started. They moved to Nairobi, Kenya a few years later, and when they originally moved to Nairobi, they started the school way out in the tea fields. The city was relatively small at that point, and so they bought some land outside of Nairobi. At that point, they were surrounded by tea fields. Since then, the past about 70 years, Nairobi's really expanded, and it just so happened, or maybe it was God ordained, that where Roslyn Academy currently is the place where a lot of the embassies started. The UN is just down the street. The US Embassy is just down the street. There's a lot of NGOs. So there's a lot of expats living in the area. So school has changed a lot. When it started in 1947, there were missionary students. It was a boarding school. When they moved to Kenya, it was still a boarding school, and it was only missionary students there. But that's changed a lot, and currently, most of the students come from surrounding embassies in the area. So they're primarily students whose parents moved to Nairobi because of embassies or because they're working with government organizations, and the school now has a really wide range of students. A lot of them stay for 4 to 6 years because their parents are moving, so most of them aren't there from first grade to 12th grade. Currently, there are about 650 students from over 50 different countries. One of my favorite experiences at Roslyn has been sitting in the graduations. We've had the opportunity to sit in 2 different graduations. And because I teach English 12, I have a lot of the graduating seniors. And it's really encouraging, it's really inspiring to sit there and hear where all these students are going to university, to hear where their goals are, what their dreams are, what they're hoping to do. And the graduating class of this year, there were 63 students from 19 different countries. 60 of them are going to universities across Europe, the US, Canada, Australia, Kenya, and Korea. And sitting there hearing where students coming from, what country their parents are from, where they're going to university, it really filled us with a sense of responsibility. And it's an incredible opportunity that we have to impact these students that are going around the world. And I think in April and May, I especially start to feel that responsibility, and I start to feel almost this sense of, I need to, as much as possible, help them on their journey toward Christ. A lot of them are coming from non-Christian backgrounds. Their parents aren't Christians, but Roslyn is unashamedly a Christian school. So there's chapel, there's Bible classes. In English classes, I have a chance to share Christian perspective on literature, characters, and making decisions. So it's this really incredible opportunity that we have students from all around the world, students that are moving to many different places, and we have this great chance to impact them for just a few years.
So one of the privileges I have is that I get to tutor privately, and I am not hired through the school, and so there's students that just need a little bit of extra help. So I'll tell one story of one of my students, and she came to Roslyn in middle school from another country with very little English, and throughout the years in middle school, the ELL teachers worked with her. They tried to help her. She was just struggling and struggling. They got her evaluated for learning disabilities, and they couldn't figure out why she just was not learning English, why she was just really not connecting. And then COVID happened, and she got even farther on behind in her class, like just in her relationships. And so when they came back to school, then they were trying to figure out a good solution for her, and the counselors decided she needs somebody to meet with her one-on-one and just help her keep up with her classwork and just kind of emotionally, meet her needs. And so this past year I got to meet with her. She was in 11th grade, and so I met with her once a week. And it was just a really special experience for me because she is a Christian, but she comes from a really hard home situation, and her journey that brought her to Roslyn was really hard. And so it was really special to see her grow from, at the beginning of the year, being very quiet, scared to ask for help, unsure of herself, and just see her open up and be willing to share some of the hard stuff that's going on in her home, her parent country, and like the needs that she had and things that I could pray about for her. And it was just a really special opportunity that I have one-on-one to meet with students and help them with their homework, help them with English language learning, with SAT prep, whatever they need, but also emotionally help them and meet their needs in that way as well.
So I think one of my favorite student stories, my first year I was there, I had a student in English 12, and his father survived the Rwandan genocide. His dad was from Rwanda, his mom was from Kenya. And his dad actually sent me some poetry that he had written, and it was really sad to see kind of his father's poetry revealing that, his dad saw these horrors, really saw some of the depravity of humanity. And his dad had a real mix of religious beliefs, kind of a mishmash of different things he believed. The student's mom was Catholic. He has some older brothers, none of whom are Christian. They all profess to be atheist. He came to Roslyn in 9th grade, and at some point in 9th grade, he started a journey toward Christ. So he became a Christian. And 9th, 10th, 11th grade, it was a real challenge for him. There were times when he felt like he was losing his faith. He had a lot of doubts, and he really didn't have any support from home. So I had him as a senior, and as a senior, he was really looking for answers. He knew he was leaving Roslyn, and so he was trying to kind of shore up his faith. So one thing he did, he started interviewing different teachers, and he'd record those interviews. So he'd come to different teachers with specific questions about faith, sit down with the teachers, kind of have this interview he recorded on his phone. So he came to me a few times. One of the times we just talked about kind of the goodness of God. We talked about heaven, and it was this really great opportunity to chat with him. He left Roslyn, but this past year he came back. He came back to visit in April, and he got to sit down with me again and ask me more questions. And he's still on this journey toward Christ. He still really doesn't have any support from home, but it was this great opportunity that we had because we're there to speak into his life a bit and hopefully help him develop a faith and really develop his belief in God.
So I get kind of involved in a lot of random stuff just because I am not working full-time. And so one of the things that I got to do this past year was do a monthly tea for the ladies in my community that are non-working spouses like me. Technically, we're considered trailing spouses, which we don't love being called, but these are all women that either hired with other organizations, are there with a mission organization, and their spouse teaches at Roslyn, or they might work part-time. And so they're part of the community, but not really. And so we have this unique opportunity to connect. And so once a month, they would come to my house, just sit on my back porch. We'd have tea and bitings and just talk about life. We'd pray. And it was just a really special group of women. And this picture here is the last tea of the year, and we were saying farewell to 3 of the women in our group, and I also announced that I was pregnant, and so there was a lot of screaming, and there was a lady walking by, and she thought there was a snake on the porch because it was noisy. But yeah, this is another group of women that I've gotten involved in, and it's just been a really special opportunity.
One thing that I started the first year that we were there is lunch with the lads, and this is something that was happening before COVID. But when COVID came along, it died out and really never started again. So the first year I was there, me and another teacher restarted Lunch with the Lads. It was originally called Man Cave, and we changed it to Lunch with the Lads. And what it is during lunch, once a week or every other week, we meet with whoever wants to show up, whatever lads want to attend. We meet in my classroom during lunch, and we discuss different topics, we ask questions, and we talk about what the Bible says about these issues. So the way it's set up is we have juniors and seniors who are responsible to choose a topic, come up with questions, and then have Bible verses that speak into those issues. So these are 3 of the issues that we talked about. These are questions that either a junior or senior guy came up with, and then we talk through these as a group, and we talk about what the Bible has to say about these questions. The first year we started, we had maybe 8 to 15 guys show up. And then this past year, we had between 30 and 50. So it's really, really expanded. And it's a lot of fun to see my classroom get packed out with 30 or 40 guys. We order donuts, we eat lunch, and we sit in small groups and discuss these questions. And again, a lot of the guys really aren't coming from Christian backgrounds. Some of them aren't professing Christians themselves, but they do care about seeking truth, finding answers, and talking about what it looks like to make good choices. This year, a lot of the issues we discussed were kind of around masculinity. What does it mean to be a man who follows Christ? What does it look like with reputation, money, relationships? We talked about things like dating, sexuality, and for the most part, they showed up with a real desire to seek truth and look in the Bible, see what the Bible's saying about these issues. The last topic we discussed was family relationships, and it was a bit disheartening for me to hear, as we started discussing family relationships, we quickly started discussing, at least in my small group, the boys' relationships with their dad. There was one boy in the group his dad is Norwegian, his mother's Kenyan. They live in Nairobi, but his dad works in Norway in the oil fields. So his dad comes home every few months for a week or two. He really doesn't have a strong relationship with his dad. And there were a few other boys in the group that had similar experiences where, because their dad is working for the UN or an embassy, he travels a lot, he's rarely at home. And there was one guy especially, it really broke my heart. He said he doesn't enjoy it when his dad's at home because there's just more tension and stress in the house at home. So it was disappointing to hear that a lot of these boys don't really have good relationships with their fathers. It was also gave me a sense of excitement that at Roslyn, we can really help these guys think through issues, help these guys discuss what it looks like to be a man who follows Christ, to make good decisions, to think about how decisions affect others, to think about family and relationships. And so this is one of our prayer requests, that you would pray for Lunch with the Lads, just that there'd be continued interest in it, guys would come seeking truth, the leaders would know what issues to choose, how to connect those issues to Scripture, and that it would have an impact on the guys that attend.
So these are all groups of people on campus that we get to interact with, the students, the teachers, our church, the women in my women's tea. And it's been really great, and it's a lot of people that we really love. But we do have to confess that there is a group at Roslyn that we do really struggle to love because they cause a lot of issues, and they like to come on campus and just, like, they'll dump trash cans if they find a trash can. They figured out how to climb up on our roof, and they stomp across the roof when we're taking naps. They're just really annoying. And then one guy even broke into our house one day and stole bananas off of our microwave and ran outside and climbed into a tree and was eating the bananas and just laughed at us. And we started kind of chasing them away when we see them. So it's just been one group that we've kind of struggled to love. They look cute, but they are really actually obnoxious.
And I did recently, my neighbor and I both got slingshots, and Tiffany has a can of dried beans that I use to chase them away. At first we loved seeing them, and we still love seeing them. Sort of. But they can be a pain. We were sitting in the living room, and suddenly we heard a thump in the kitchen. And so we looked around the corner, and there was a monkey. He had the bananas on the ground, and he saw us, and he just grabbed one and ran out the door. And then he went up in the nearest tree and ate it. It looked like he was laughing at us as he was eating it.
It was my fault because I did leave the back door open, but it was kind of annoying. Anyhow, on a more serious note, one other group that I want to tell you about is our house workers. Julius is our gardener, and Irene is our house helper. Julius is a pastor in his church. He's a father of 4 children. He sends his greetings to our church. He comes once a week to do our outside work and wash our car, and he's just a really kind man that we have the blessing of employing. And then Irene, she is part of the choir at her church. She is mother to, I think, 3 daughters, and she also sends her greetings as well. And she comes once a week, and she cleans the house. She helps with cooking and cleaning and food, and she'll probably help a lot with the baby coming up too. We're so blessed. They're both lovely Christian people. They're dependable, they're trustworthy, and they're so kind, and they've taught us a lot about the Kenyan culture and the community around us, and through them we also have a direct opportunity to help the local community. But it is a little bit weird. Hiring workers is really common in a lot of countries where labor is cheap, and in a country like Kenya, unemployment is really, really high, and so the school really encourages their employees to hire locals to work for them, even if you don't need it. We don't really need a gardener, we don't really need a house help, but it is really a way for us to give back to the community in a country where there's a lot of unemployment. It was a really big adjustment for us, and it still is. It feels awkward at times because we're much younger than them. Their children are closer to our age, and they're much more economically on behind compared to us. They both have big needs in their lives that by US standards are really not that big. Julius is parent to twins. His youngest two are twins. They're ready to enter the next level of education, which requires double the school fees, double the books, textbooks, anything they need for school, all these expenses in a country where people are struggling to pay school fees already. And so he has double at the same time. And Irene, she and her husband own their own property. They have a small farm, so they're ahead of a lot of people in that way, but they live in a temporary sheet metal home. And so they've been saving up to build a permanent home, but because it's so expensive to build the foundation, to build the roof, and of course inflation has also affected Kenya, these are big needs. And when I look at these needs, it's hard. Both of those needs together could be easily resolved with less than what most Americans spend on a car. But they are huge needs in their lives, and it's a way that we can help them, but we don't know how to do it well. Because of the history of Kenya, the culture is really ripe with locals expecting handouts, expecting benefits from the wealthy Americans and expats that come in, as well as a dependence that has built up over the years for these handouts. So it's really hard to give generously in Kenya because if you're not careful, it's really easy to create a dependence, an expectation for giving in the future. In the case of Julius and Irene, we're really blessed. They've never once asked us for more than what we are expected to pay them as our employees. They've never demanded that we help with their needs. And so they're really gracious people, but we know that they have these needs and we would like to help them, but we don't want to do it in a way that creates a dependence for them or creates a requirement for other people in our community for them to do the same for their house help. We want to help in a way that isn't patronizing because we're so much younger than them. So this is things that we deal with. There's a lot of ways that we can help in Kenya, financially especially, but we want to do it really, really well. And so that's our prayer, that we can help without harming with these specific needs, but the other needs that are around us. And that's kind of the struggle that we deal with a lot in trying to build the community there.
A few prayer requests. One is continued health during the pregnancy, wisdom as we adjust to life with a baby. The baby is due at the end of November, and we're really excited about it.
It's a boy.
And it's a boy. We're really excited about it, but we know that life is going to change, and so we appreciate prayers as we adjust to that. You can also pray for lunch with the lads. Again, it feels like a really unique opportunity that I have to help guide some of the boys. Pray for the school year and the students. Teachers start back August 2nd, so it's coming up very quickly. And I'll have the same classes, so you can continue to pray that I know how to especially bring in a biblical worldview with the issues that we're discussing. Tiffany's tutoring students. She tutors after school, and so it's a lot of fun having her at school, in my classroom some, but just continue to pray for her as she does that. And lastly, wisdom to know how to help those around us who are struggling with poverty. Like Tiffany said, it's very challenging to know how to help without hurting. There are lots of stories at Roslyn where people have tried to help generously and ended up really harming relationships or maybe harming what Roslyn's trying to do. So it can be challenging to know how to help people around us, especially the people that are really close to us like Julius and Irene. So if you think about us, you can pray for these. I will be talking a bit about the benefits of community. This is something that I feel like God has been teaching us the past 2 years in Kenya. I feel like God's been teaching us a lot about the value of community because of our community here at Oasis and our community in Kenya. So I decided to share a little bit about what we're learning. We really do feel incredibly blessed by our community here in Lancaster. Coming back this summer, we've had multiple people offer to pick us up from the airport. We've had offers of cars. We've had people really show a lot of interest in our lives. We've had so many people invite us for meals that we weren't able to make it to everybody's house. We've had really a lot of people show support. And we just want you to know that we're really grateful for that. I think living in Kenya has revealed to us how blessed we are because of Oasis in our community here. And we really do know that any good that God does through us in Kenya is a result of our communities here. And we really couldn't do it without you, so we appreciate that. We also really appreciate the messages people send to us while we're there and back here. We feel that you do care about us. It means a lot. We're also learning about community while living at Roslyn. The campus is 40 acres, and there are about 50 families of teachers who live on campus. So it's a small, tight community. The teachers come from Kenya, Korea, the US, Canada, Australia. A lot of the teachers come from very different backgrounds. They've taught in different international schools. They have very different perspectives. On the board at Roslyn, there are Southern Baptists, Eastern Mennonite Missions, and Assemblies of God. So there are even different perspectives on faith and what it means to follow Christ. So because of all the diversity there, it feels like we're learning a lot about striving to live in Christian unity with people that are different from us. And it can be challenging living in really close quarters. Everybody knows what's happening in everybody's lives. And for somebody like me who's more of an introvert, it can be difficult, challenging to know how to deal with constantly being surrounded by people who always know what's going on in our lives. But it really has given us a unique opportunity to learn how to live in Christian unity with people with a common mission. Throughout Scripture, God has used individuals to impact communities. He's used communities to impact the world. And so I think moving to Kenya has given us an excitement to work and support Christian communities. It's motivated us more to pray for Oasis, to pray for Roslyn, to pray that God continues to work in and through both of those communities. And Scripture gives a lot of compelling reasons to live in community, but three specifically that we've been learning about. One is the idea of iron sharpens iron. God uses us to shape each other. God uses us to make us more effective for his kingdom. We can also share in each other's joys and sorrows. And third, we can use our individual giftings together to reveal a more complete perspective of who God is, of his love, his justice, and we can be his hands and feet. So the first idea of iron sharpens iron, Proverbs talks about this. Proverbs gives this word picture. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. When I was 20 years old, I went to Calvary Bible School for 3 weeks during a winter term, and while I was there, I had a teacher named Mel Stoltzfus. Some of you know him. And he's a teacher I really respected. He cared about the students a lot. He was thoughtful in approaching issues, and I just loved learning from him. And while I was there, I was standing in line one day for lunch in the cafeteria, and he happened to be standing in line behind me. So we were talking as we were waiting in line for lunch. And the way the cafeteria was set up, the line went through several hallways before it came to the food. So you couldn't see the food. You couldn't really see how fast the line was moving. The day he was standing behind me, we were chatting, and the line was stopped. It just wasn't moving at all, and we couldn't see why. We couldn't see what was happening. So as we were standing there, I made this offhand comment to him. I meant it to be lighthearted and humorous, but I said something about, people eat too much food. And he stopped me and he said, Sheldon, you should really be careful of what you say because a comment like that could come across as hurtful to somebody that struggles with their weight. And then the conversation moved on. And he probably doesn't even remember that. It was a 15 or 20-second conversation, but he allowed God to use him to really shape me and become more effective for his kingdom because it influenced me, it impacted me, it forced me to think about my words and how I'm coming across. And I think living in community is this incredible opportunity for us to shape each other, to make us more effective for God and for his kingdom. And it does take a lot of courage. It took courage for Mel to confront me. It took courage for him to step into that in the moment. And iron sharpening iron is not easy or pleasant, right? It took humility from me to accept that instead of becoming defensive. But this idea of sharpening iron is a really powerful reason to live in community with each other. The picture that I have on the screen is a picture of Macbeth. I teach English 12 classes, and English 12 can be notoriously difficult to teach in April and May. Seniors are ready to graduate. At Roslyn, By March and April, most of the seniors know where they're going to university. They've been accepted to universities. They're looking forward to graduation. They're looking forward to senior trip. It's an exciting time. And the last thing they want to do is sit in an English class they never chose to be in the first place. So I save Shakespeare's Macbeth for the very end because even though it is Shakespeare, it's a really short play. Things happen quickly, and it's this bloody tragedy where there's really no pause in the story. In the story of Macbeth, Macbeth is the main character, and at the beginning of the play, he's known as somebody who's brave, loyal, everybody respects him. He's a general for the king, and the first act, people only have good things to say about him. By the end of the play, everybody in the audience and everybody in Scotland is happy when Macbeth finally dies. And it's a tragedy because it's this man who went from being respected, having everybody around him admire him, to really coming to a place where people were rejoicing at his death. And I think part of the reason it happened is because he didn't have a community around him that challenged him, that confronted him, and that held him accountable. In Act 1, Macbeth is tempted to kill the king and take the throne for himself. And the moment he's tempted, he has one of his best friends is beside him, and his best friend's name is Banquo. And Banquo sees he's tempted to kill the king and take the throne, and Banquo doesn't speak up. Banquo could have taken that opportunity to say, Macbeth, I know you're being tempted. I'm here to support you. Make a wise choice. But Banquo never does that. Macbeth kills the king. He blames it on somebody else. He hides it. He takes the throne. And Banquo is suspicious that Macbeth did it. But again, Banquo never confronts him. And I think it's such a sad picture of community and friendship. There's this friend who sees somebody being tempted. He sees him make a wrong choice, and he never confronts him or holds him accountable. Having each other to hold each other accountable, to push each other to turn back when we make wrong choices, is one of the incredible reasons that we should live in community. And it would have taken a lot of courage from Banquo. It would have taken a lot of courage from Banquo to say, Macbeth, I know you're being tempted. I want to stand beside you. It would have taken a lot of courage to say, Macbeth, did you kill the king? You need to turn back before it's too late. But Banquo didn't have that courage. The first story I shared, Mel had the courage to confront me. Banquo didn't. And so Tiffany and I are learning, I think God is teaching us more how we can confront each other, hold each other accountable, how we can try to live in community where we help each other become more effective for God and for his kingdom. So the second reason is rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. The last day of classes this year, I wrote a letter to each one of my classes, and at the end of the letter, I said, I look forward to introducing each of you to the newest member of the King family when you return. And it took a little bit for the students to figure it out, but finally they figured out, oh, Sheldon and Tiffany are expecting a baby. And they did an amazing job of capturing the spirit of this verse. They got really excited. They rejoiced with us. The rest of class we spent discussing baby names. And Tiffany and I were excited about having a baby. But there's something really special about rejoicing together in community that makes something exciting all the more exciting. I left school that day feeling even more excited about the birth of our baby than I had before. And that's because of community. This past year, the Spanish teacher at Roslyn had cancer, and so she went back to Costa Rica, where she was from, for treatment. The last day she was at school, the school opened up her classroom and said, anybody can come and pray with her during the day. So I went to her classroom over lunch, and I literally didn't get in the classroom because it was packed. So I stood outside, I tried to listen through the window. People prayed with her, people encouraged her, and again, it's a beautiful picture of a community surrounding a person that's weeping, surrounding a person that's facing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And I think this is something that's so incredibly powerful that the world needs. The world, I think everybody is drawn to a community that's rejoicing and weeping together, that knows how to support and encourage each other and share in joys and sorrows. Tiffany tells me occasionally about what's going on in the women's chat group in Oasis. She doesn't tell me everything. She doesn't tell me a lot, I think. But she tells me occasionally about prayer requests and joys that the women from Oasis are sharing with each other. And again, I think that's such a great picture of this verse, that as a Christian community, we're sharing our joys, sharing our sorrows. We know how to weep and rejoice together. And Tiffany and I really want to do this with you. I know that we're living in Kenya, so it's much more challenging to know what's happening in your lives, but we want to commit ourselves to rejoicing with you, to weeping with you, to lifting you up in prayer. And we do really want to be vulnerable and transparent as well, so that you can rejoice with us, so that you can weep with us, so that we can travel through life together, pursuing God and sharing each other's burdens. The last reason to live in community is to be the hands and feet of Christ. 1 Corinthians talks about being one body, talks about, many parts forming one body. We are the body of Christ. Individually, we're members of it. Talks about the hands and feet of Christ. One of my favorite stories of a student at Roslyn, the first year I got to Roslyn, I came in as a new teacher, and I had a new student who was at Roslyn as well. And so this new student was in my classroom. I didn't know anything about her background. I was a new teacher. I think it was the second week of classes. We read an article about a girl from the US who was wearing a hijab in school. And so we talked about freedom of religion. We talked about issues of safety in schools. Where do schools take a stance on an issue like this? What should a government do? And so I had the students just discussing this issue. And they talked for most of class. When we got to the end of class, I said, you have 5 more minutes. If you have something to share, share it now. And this new student hadn't spoken at all. And I could tell she was really nervous. And so she kind of nervously inserted herself into the conversation. And she started off by saying, I just stopped wearing a hijab. And I don't remember what she said after that because I was taken aback. And I think I would have chosen a different article if I would have known that. But I was taken aback, and I had no idea she was coming from this Muslim background. And it took a lot of courage for her to say that. The rest of the year was really challenging for her. She dealt a lot with anxiety. When we'd have classroom discussions, she'd often talk with me beforehand and either go to the guidance office or sit in the back of the room and just take notes, just because she couldn't force herself to join the conversation. She was by herself a lot, and she was really struggling to find community and friends at Roslyn. When she became a senior, I didn't have her in any of my classes, so I didn't interact with her as much, but she changed dramatically, and I could see that even though I wasn't interacting with her. As a senior, she joined the worship team. So in chapel, every other week, she actually joined the worship team and would sing about Jesus Christ, right? And this girl who's coming from a Muslim background. She joined the high school musical and was part of that. When I saw her around school, she was surrounded with friends. It looked like she really found community. And it was exciting to see that, but again, I really didn't interact with her much. The last day of school this year, at the end of May, she came into my classroom and she started thanking me for being her teacher. And then she started crying. She really just started weeping and said, Roslyn has been this incredible place for me. I felt loved. And she's on a journey toward Christ, which is really exciting. And she said, it's this place that I felt loved and accepted. And then she said, I had a friend that reminded me that in your class last year, I never spoke up. And now I'm singing on stage. I'm part of a musical. I'm willing to speak up, and I have friends. And it was really exciting for me to hear that. And it was so exciting for me to hear that I was a part of that journey. And it was a really, really small part. Paul talks about the hands and feet of Christ. The toe says, I'm not the ear, so I'm not of the body. I was probably just a finger in the body of Christ, right? Played a small role. I was one teacher, 1 year out of a lot of teachers she had. But I think together, Roslyn really showed her who God is and accepted her and loved her. And I could be a small part in that. And that's what's really exciting, that as a community, together with our different strengths and weaknesses, we can more fully demonstrate God and his love. And together, we can play a role in really bringing people to Christ, showing people what it means to love God. So, 3 reasons to live in community. Let me back up one. That Tiffany and I have been learning about. Iron sharpens iron. We share each other's joys and sorrows, and we really use our individual giftings to portray a more complete picture of God. And living in community is not at all easy. We're individuals who are in the midst of being redeemed, right? We're individuals who often fall back into selfishness. We're individuals with very different perspectives. So it's not easy to live in community. It's not easy to live in Christian unity the way God has called us to do. And we really don't need to look further than Paul's letters, right? His missionary journeys to see that the early church had challenges living together. And at Roslyn, there are a lot of challenges. One challenge that we currently have at Roslyn is that because the school changed dramatically, there's a lot of specifics in the school that have changed. So Roslyn originally was missionary students, and it's changed a lot to embassy students. There are teachers who have been at Roslyn a long time that say we should go back to being more of a missionary-focused school. And there are a lot of teachers that say, God has placed Roslyn here in the midst of all these embassies. We need to focus on becoming an international Christian school that attracts these students. And both of those visions really honor God, right? Both of them want to use the school to honor God. But those two visions really can be at odds sometimes. The teachers that want it to be a missionary school say we need to lower tuition. We need to bring teachers that are going to raise support and be missionary focused. We should stop spending money on making the campus larger and more beautiful and just lower tuition. Teachers that want to, capitalize on the embassy students say we need to raise tuition. We need to bring in teachers who have more international experience. We need to bring in more APs. We need to make the campus larger and more beautiful to attract those students. And so those two perspectives are definitely at odds with each other at times. And so it can be challenging. Which perspective should we pursue? Which path should we pursue? So living community is not easy, but it is this incredible path that God has called us to do. And God has called us to live together, to sharpen each other, to weep, and to experience each other's joys, and to really work together for the good of his kingdom. And Tiffany and I want to commit to doing that with you as a church. Like I said, I know it's challenging because we're living far away, but we want to commit to praying for you as a church. We want to commit to, as much as possible, praying for your sorrows, sharing your joys, and allowing God to shape us through you. Feel free to message us while we're in Kenya. We love receiving messages, and hopefully we can stay in touch with you the next 2 years. Thank you again for all your support. It's been a really incredible blessing having you as our church.